Welcome to Zonie Living. I'm Bonnie Stevens, and our guest today has the gift for taking struggling companies to massive success. Paul Thomas calls himself a serial CEO. In his roles as CEO and president for more than 30 years, he's led more than a dozen publicly traded, venture-backed, and technology startups. He's done this in Africa, China, Europe, India, Japan, and throughout the United States. And he's experienced nearly everything that a leader can experience, and now he shares that knowledge with students at Northern Arizona University and in his new book, Serial CEO, Lessons from the Climb. Paul, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Bonnie. I appreciate it.
Well, I know you've worked all over the world, and you have this superpower for walking into a difficult situation and turning it around. And I am sure that you are the guy that the board of directors calls whenever there's a problem and they're trying to decide, should we shut down the company or should we invest more into it? So tell us about this. What is the biggest challenge you have faced when you've walked into a situation like this?
I guess there's been a number of them. There's always a situation where the investors or the board, there's some crisis, something has happened, and they need somebody to come in and make a decision. Do we shut this company down? Do we invest more? To be honest with you, I think the biggest challenge tends to be with your team, with employees, and managing the personalities of different employees.
And I know you don't like it when you don't want to be in that position of just managing a company that's humming along calmly and everything's going well. You like a good challenge. What are some more common mistakes or problems that companies are having?
I think the biggest is that, and this kind of goes back to my education. I was a finance major, and so I have a love of numbers, and I think there tends to be, especially in technology companies, great engineering, great marketing, but when it really comes down to it, it comes down to how are you managing the cash, how are you managing the fundamentals of the business, and I think that tends to be something a lot of people don't see. It's I've seen that in organizations where we've raised lots of money. What we've done, the organizations did a poor job of managing basic financials and basic numbers.
Yeah, big job and an important job. And we don't always think that that's the important job. Well, in Serial CEO, the book that Paul Thomas has just written, he talks about company cultures. Paul, how do you assess a company culture, and how does that help you with overall management?
There's a practice that I would always do. As soon as I would go into the organization, I would take the first 30 to 60 days to have one-on-ones with every single employee. And what I would ask them a series of three questions. And the first question was, who are you and what do you do? And that gives you a sense of, from their perspective, what role they play in the organization. I would ask them, how many times have they looked to leave the company and why?
You ask them that.
Yeah.
And they tell you honestly.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then the third question I would ask is, if you were me coming in as the new CEO, tell me three things you would change and tell me three things that you would leave alone. After you have those one-on-ones, you find out exactly what the culture is like inside the organization. You find out what the issues are. You find out what the positives are. And then the other thing that is really important is once you have those one-on-ones is then to meet with all the employees in an all-employee meeting and say, let me tell you what I heard, then let me tell you what I think we can change or fix, and then let me tell you the things that we're not going to be able to make any change on. The key is to make sure you do that follow-up, because if you don't, people will say, I just wasted my time with him.
Yeah, well, it sounds like transparency and feedback is really key.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about the character qualities that make a good CEO. And you've told me, and a lot of people know this, that entrepreneurs don't necessarily make great CEOs. So you kind of have two different skill sets. Can you tell us about those two?
Yeah, and I can do this based on myself as a serial CEO. I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't have I don't have vision, I don't have the ability to look at something that either needs to be fixed or has potential. But entrepreneurs are great at ideas. And one of my favorite entrepreneurs is Elon Musk. If you go further back, it would be Walt Disney. They used to say that Walt Disney had 10 new ideas every single day. And he had his brother Roy Disney, who was more of an operations person, more of a COO that would say, we can't do all these 10 ideas. We can maybe look at this one. And so that's always been my experience with great entrepreneurs. They have 10 ideas every single day that they want to bring forward. And my role as the CEO was always to kind of say, listen, let's focus on this one, or let's not worry about this right now. This is what we have in front of us, and let's get focused on that.
Well, I love that you bring them back to focus, because in my experience, when you're around entrepreneurs, they not only have great ideas and 10 of them at a time, they're also super enthusiastic and very convincing that these are great ideas, and that enthusiasm is contagious. So that has to be a real talent, to be disciplined and to be able to hone them in and discuss what could be a possibility.
Yeah, one of my late jobs was CEO of a company called Komaza. We were based in Kenya, Africa, and the founder was a brilliant entrepreneur. And what he came up with was a way to grow trees for the poorest families in Kenya, Africa, and then get to the point where we would harvest those trees to make lumber and then provide income to the poorest of the poor. And I remember when I first started working with Tevis, we were just the first year of planting trees, and he was always coming to me every day with sawmill ideas. And I kept saying to him, Tevis, we don't need to worry about a sawmill for at least 7 years. Let's focus on how we're going to get these trees planted. But that's the great thing about entrepreneurs. Great ideas all the time.
Love that. Well, here's one of my favorite topics for leaders, and that's decisiveness. And you call that the CEO's ultimate skill. Tell us about that.
Yeah. There's a thing that is called analysis paralysis, where you get to the point where before I make a decision, I need to really analyze and analyze and analyze.
Sure.
And I think it get to the point where you say, I want to make sure it's 100% the right thing to do. And to me, that's analysis paralysis. My philosophy was always make a decision quickly. If it's wrong, you can fix it. And I've never had a decision that I've made that I said, oh, that destroyed the company, or that destroyed this relationship or this sale. So I think it's one of those things, you get as much feedback as you can, as quickly as you can. Look to your team if you have the time. If not, the buck has to stop with you, and so you just make the decision and then move forward.
Yes, you really have to own it, don't you? If you're the CEO, that's a big part of your job, is making that decision, even if it's not popular, even if other people can't see it or don't have the energy for it. And then, as you said, keep an eye on it, make a correction.
Yeah, and I talk about that in my book too. And if something bad happens in the organization, as the CEO, you still have to own it, even if it wasn't your doing. And I think a good practice of a good CEO is when great things happen, give credit to the team. When bad things happen, fall on your sword and take the, not the credit, but take the blame when something bad happens.
Yeah, that's a really powerful lesson, and I don't think everybody does that easily.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you also talk about habits of great managers. Do you have a favorite habit? I was looking in your book, and let me see if I can find some of these habits. You just said taking ownership and protecting your team, seeking help and advice is a strength, demonstrating appreciation. I like all of these, but you gave us quite a few. Is there a favorite that stands out?
I think there's two that always stand out for me. One is always look to get advice, always look to get help.
Oh, that's a good one.
And I think that a lot of times new managers feel like, okay, I'm a manager now, or I'm a president now, and so I have to, if I ask for help or advice, it's a weakness. Always ask for help and advice. The other thing is always look out for your team. The team is, as you mentioned, I've been a CEO of more than 15 organizations, and some of them were wildly successful, some of them were huge failures, but the ones that did great, it was the team. And I think it's so important that you always look out for your team because they're the ones that will make or break the organization.
I think as a young person entering the workforce, that's a good lesson to know, because you'll run into some of those people, or you'll want to talk to some of those people again and talk about, get some advice or talk about a situation they've been. And if you are not right there for your team and you're not easy to get along with, you do lose out.
Yeah, I tell people, and this is part of teaching at NAU, I teach management and I teach entrepreneurship, and I talk to the students about being a manager and ask them, how many of you want to be a manager, and then ask them why. And what I tell people is, if you truly don't care about people, if you don't have the ability to sympathize and empathize with other people, you're going to have a hard time being a manager. You truly have to care about having people that work for you succeed. And to me, that's one of the most important things that a manager can be. And if you can't fake that.
Yeah, that's really good advice to young people that are going into business. Well, in Paul's book, this is called, we've already said it a couple of times, Serial CEO, Lessons from the Climb. He points out the importance of having a mentor. So what should we be looking for in a mentor, and how do we know when we've learned all that we can from that person?
Yeah, I've had people ask me, what's the number one thing out of the book that you want to make sure that people understand? And to me, it's the importance of mentors. And early on in my career, I had somebody ask me, who is your mentor? And I told them who it was. And they said to me, whether it's a week from now or a year from now, you're going to think that mentor is not as smart as you originally thought they were, when in fact it's just that you have learned all that you can learn. And it's going to be important now to move on to another mentor. I think the mistake some people make is that they think it has to be some sort of an official agreement where I go to somebody and say, hey, will you be my mentor? Some of my mentors, I don't think they ever knew that they were my mentors, because I just looked at how they operated and what they did and said, that's the kind of person that I want to be. But I think it's really, really important. I'll be 65 this month, and I still look for mentors. And I think it's really important to find people so that you constantly grow, but also understand that you go from one mentor to another. And then the other thing that I would stress is take the opportunity to help mentor others, because that's what helped you get to where you are. So make sure that you give it back as well.
Great advice, and happy birthday, by the way. And Paul also talks about charting the CEO's course. You highlight 15 key points, and we've talked about some of those already, but you write about things like traveling efficiently, which I really enjoyed reading that, the power of a handwritten note, I also appreciated that, and acting as a positive ambassador as an American.
I had worked with somebody who was the vice president of a division. He was well-liked, very successful. The division did great. And one day, unexpectedly, a notice went out that he was resigning and leaving the company. And I remember going to him and saying, why would you leave the company? And his comment was, my stomach doesn't hurt anymore. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, whenever you do something new, if you have to stand up in front of a group, you get this knot in your stomach. And he said, that means that you are growing. And he said, my stomach hasn't hurt for a long time, and so it's time for me to go out and get uncomfortable again. And I think that's really important. I think when you get to the point, and in a job, whatever you're doing, if you're not growing, if you're not learning, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. And I think it's time then to get uncomfortable again. So I spent a lot of time being uncomfortable And I think it was important to do.
Yeah, well, I love that. That's great feedback if your stomach doesn't hurt, and hopefully it's in a good way. Well, also you talk about family. You make a big point of family and how that contributed to your success personally. Your wife Jill, your kids Casey, Matt, and Ross, and how really valuable that was for you. And you were also talking about the young executives meeting that you learned so much from. So tell us a little bit about that too.
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate. My wife and I have been married for 40 years, and my daughter Casey, when she applied to college, and you have to do a college essay, in her college essay, she wrote how she had to move 16 times in her 18 years of life.
Wow.
And how that had impacted her. Well, those 16 moves were because of me. And never in my career did my family ever complain. They just went along with me. I even at one point was getting ready to do a move, and my father-in-law called me and started saying, "What are you doing? Why are you moving again? This isn't good for your family." And so part of the reason I wrote the book was really for my wife and for my kids, because if it wasn't for that support that I had, I would have never had the career that I had. And they're the ones that tended to suffer for it. But I also talk about the importance of also having a third party. And so there is a group called Young Presidents Organization, and it's made up of young CEOs. And so when I first got my very first CEO job, I joined YPO, and I remember going to my very first meeting thinking, this is awesome, I'm gonna learn all the secrets of business. And what I found was there aren't any tricks or secrets to business. It's about having stability in your personal life. Wow. And the leaders that had issues were because either at their family or in their personal life. And so I quickly learned there's, as long as you have that stability, then you can face any business problem that you're hit with.
Well, I love that, and I feel like that's sort of a new lesson that we've learned through the years. I'm not sure that was always the case.
Yeah, I remember one time, and this was not a mentor, I was at a company and we had a new president coming in, and he was well known, and he had been, a story about him had been written in Business Week, and he bragged about how his child was 6 months old and he hadn't held the child yet because he was so busy. Oh. And I thought, I don't know that that's the right thing to be bragging about. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think I just can't say enough about the support that friends and family played in my career.
Well, it's very authentic in your book, and it makes you feel really appreciative towards your family when you're reading it, and our own families. But let's talk about today's casual culture, and we're living in a society where we seemingly are not afraid to share anything and everything, and we've got social media, of course. But I'm sure you have some advice for being professional and relatable without crossing over boundaries. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I have this conversation with my students.
I bet.
There is this, and I don't know why it is, there is this culture that says, I want to send this picture out when I'm at this party or I'm at this restaurant, and I don't understand it. I've never been a Facebook person. I don't have a Facebook. I do LinkedIn, but that's it. What I try to explain to everybody is whatever you post is there forever.
Forever.
And I think sometimes people think, no, I have the ability to make this private, or I have the ability to erase this. And I can tell you that I know I've had situations where we were on the verge of hiring a senior executive, And as we did a search, we found things out on social media
dear.
that were not what we wanted within our organization. Yet this person had gone through all the interviews, everything had gone great, and we found something and said, you know what, let's not do this. And so I tell everybody, if you're going to post, first thing I say, please don't post, but if you're going to post, assume that your grandparents, your parents, and if you have children, your children are going to see it.
Oh, boy.
And if you're still okay with all those people seeing whatever it is you're going to post, then post. But I think it's I think it's great if for an organization to make sure, but I don't know that there's an upside to putting lots of things out on social media for individuals.
Well, let's talk about, now that we're in the holiday season, let's talk about office parties, business parties. What's the appropriate behavior there?
Yeah, and I get pushback on this from students every now and then, even from my kids sometimes. And I write about this in the book. It's my advice to you that whether it's a party for the holidays, whether it's a party where you're being recruited and they're saying, hey, we're bringing all the MBA students together for a little get-together, my advice to people is don't drink. And I've had people say, well, then doesn't it look like I'm not social, or doesn't it look like this? I tell people, if you feel like you have to look like you're drinking, ask the bartender when you get club soda to put a lime in it or something. Mm-hmm. I have seen careers ruined over alcohol, and I've never seen anything good come out of it. Again, it was early in my career. It was a holiday party, and there was a senior vice president who drank so much that he borderline almost got fired, and it was
wow.
And I've just seen it in my own organization. Even as I traveled all over the world, and there are some cultures that business gets done at a bar or at a restaurant, and there are some cultures that they want you to drink. I always found a way to avoid it. I can remember one time in Japan, it was a big deal that we were trying to close, and they kept trying to get me to drink, and I said, you know what, I'm on an antibiotic right now, and so I can't mix alcohol with it.
That's a great one. I like that. That's a great excuse.
So my son was recruiting some MBA students, and he was in Florida, and what they would do is they would rent a yacht, and they would have all these MBA students on it.
Oh, boy.
And they would have an open bar.
Sure.
And so they sort of did it as a test to say, how are you going to act? Because if you're going to act this way, and we haven't hired you yet, what are you going to be like as you are dealing with clients?
Oh, boy.
So
a little bit of a trap.
Yeah, I think people have to be careful. And so I'd say save the drinking when you're home with friends and family.
Sage advice. I love that. Well, let's talk about the job interview. When I was reading your book, I appreciated that you knew your value and you knew what you wanted from the position. So both for the company and for your professional development. Well, I think a lot of us go into interviews thinking all about how we can impress the company, but it's really a two-way street, isn't it? It's an agreement about what's going to work out best for both the company and for you.
Right.
So let's talk about the process. What's the best way to go into an interview, and what impresses you?
I think probably the biggest mistake that people make is they don't take the time to research the company. One of the very first questions you'll get asked is, tell me what you know about my company, or tell me what you know about this organization. And it is so easy to find out information about companies these days. And if you haven't done that basic thing, you're going to be, you're right off the bat, you're going to be hurt. So I think there's a couple key things that I always tell people. Get there early, but not way early. If your interview's at 2 o'clock, get there about a quarter till or 10 till. And then you want to make sure you get there so that you can, whether you're waiting in the lobby, you're standing and ready for when they come out and get you. And you have to remember the first few seconds that they see you, that's the start of the interview. And so impression is very important. And so I would always recommend to people, dress professional. And if they tell you it's a casual or don't worry about, and if somebody says, did you not get the notice, it's casual, you say, I did, but it's really important to me to make a great first impression, and that's why I came professional. I think it's important to have a portfolio so that as people are talking, one of the first questions I would always ask is, do you mind if I write while we talk?
Oh.
And that shows that it's important what they're saying. It also gives you time to think about a question that's being asked. Another thing that sometimes people will say at the end of the interview, they'll say, do you have any questions? And the worst thing you can say is, no, I think you pretty much covered everything. So I look at it as it's truly a conversation, and you have to truly be interested in the person and the organization. And I remember, this was when I was in college, I had an interview, it was with Honeywell, and they had invited me down to Phoenix for a final interview. And at the end of the interview, I said, would you mind giving me a tour of the facility? And this person said to me, in 4 years of interviewing college students, I've never had anybody ask me for a tour of the facility. And it's advice that I give to everybody. I don't care if it's, my son was interviewing for a valet job. And I said to him, at the end of the interview, ask, can you show me where we park the cars? And he joked and said, well, they're going to point to the parking garage and say, well, we're right there. And he asked, and they started walking him across the parking lot. And the manager stopped and said, you know what? I'm going to offer you the job. And he wore a suit to the interview and said that he was the only one that wore a suit to the interview. And so the way I equate it is, it's kind of like a friend that's just had a baby, and they show you the baby, and if you don't say, oh, let me hold it, or say things about it, then you're insulting them. And so look at it as you have to really, really, really be interested. It's not, you can't fake it. Yeah.
Right. Well, I love that because that's their baby. And, you know, when you were talking about that too, I think that's brilliant because it's kind of like a date. You know, you get more time spent with that person that you're trying to woo to begin with.
Right.
And then it becomes more comfortable too if you're just walking and talking. So I think you get a little bonus out of that extra time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we should note that Paul has an educational background in business administration, finance, and leadership. And now anyone who reads his book, Serial CEO, or hears him speak or watches him work might believe he was born this way, raised and mentored to understand business and groomed to be able to walk into any situation and feel comfortable and confident with an audience of international business leaders, speaking different languages perhaps, and some having very different cultures. But he did not grow up in a world of wealth and sophistication, and in fact, it was just the opposite. Paul tells me that as a child, his mom would wrap his lunch in newspaper. So I want you to hear this backstory. This is incredible.
Yeah, and it would, and my mom would do that if we didn't bring the lunch bag home. So the lunch bag had to last weeks, and if for some reason you threw it away, then your lunch would be wrapped in newspaper.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, I grew up in a very poor family, but it wasn't until I was in college that I realized that. And I remember it was my freshman year, had gone to my roommate's house for Thanksgiving, and I remember being amazed that they had 4 bedrooms in this house, and there were 3 bathrooms, and all the bathrooms had showers. I grew up in there were 5 kids in my family, and my brother and I shared a bed, not a bedroom, we shared a bed. And, but when you grow up that way, you assume everybody is that way. And so
Sure.
it was a great childhood. But I remember calling my parents and saying, my roommate's rich. They have 3 bedrooms or 3 bathrooms in their house, And everybody has a shower because we didn't even have a shower in our one bathroom house. And I remember even when it was, when I decided to go to college, my parents questioned, why do you need to go to college?
Oh,
And
okay.
I was a first generation college student in my family. And this goes back again to mentors. I had either professors or staff at the university that sort of took me under their wing. And
Nice.
I remember not even knowing how to tie a tie or not even knowing really basic things in business. And it really is those early mentors that had impact on me. But it also helped me in business because growing up with nothing, I knew life was okay. And so later in business, it allowed me to take incredible risk because I looked at it and said, well, if I lose everything, I'll still be fine because I was fine when I had nothing before.
That's a great reference point. Well, Paul Thomas was a young adult when computer technology was developing at a frenetic pace. And Paul, you were part of that world.
Yeah, early in my career, right out of college, I went into banking, actually. And then there was an opportunity to go to what was one of the early computer companies. It was a computer franchise organization called MicroAge, based in Tempe. And it used to be that you couldn't buy computers. You couldn't just go to Best Buy or you couldn't go online.
Hard to imagine.
Yeah, you had to go into computer authorized stores. And so Apple had their own computer stores, and Compaq and IBM had computer stores. And so I was hired to go to MicroAge actually in an accounting function, and had an opportunity to start working with all the different computer dealers in a role. And as a result of that, got hired by both Apple Computer and Compaq Computer in the early days. And so really learned marketing from organizations like Compaq Computer and Apple Computer back in the days when there was no such thing as an Apple phone, even prior to really internet and email. So I was fortunate to get to work with some of the most amazing people in the technology world.
That had to be really
Yeah.
exciting time.
Yeah.
Well, you also mentioned Elon Musk, and I'm curious about why you study him. You noticed that you read a book about him recently, and I also wondered what you think he's going to do in his new role with the Trump administration and the Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah, I guess I guess we tend to always admire people that have the ability to do the things that we can't. And I've always admired the entrepreneurs that I've been able to partner with because they have vision that I just don't have. And one of the companies that I was the CEO for is the parent company of what eventually became Google Earth. And so
That's incredible.
we sold that division to Google, and it was called Keyhole at the time. And I remember I had an opportunity to make a big investment in the company before we sold it to Google. And I looked at it and I said, it's neat that you can zoom down and see your house, but I don't know that it's ever going to really amount to much. And so I admire people who have vision and see things that we don't. And that's the thing that's just amazing about Elon Musk. And I include Walt Disney in that. If you read about both of them, you'll read about all the naysayers, all the negative things, all the bad things that happened, and yet they just kept fighting. I think about how Elon Musk, when he came out with Tesla, nobody wanted to invest in that. Yet he had just sold PayPal and said, I'm going to take all this money and I'm going to invest in it myself because no one else believes in it. And I remember somebody saying why did you take such a risk? And his response was, there was no risk. And so to have that vision, I just think it's amazing. And I think he's going to do amazing things in the Trump administration.
the vision and not just this is a great idea, but I believe in this so much, I'm all in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, your talent extends to the nonprofit world as well. Paul Thomas co-founded the Northern Arizona Center for Nonprofit Entrepreneurship. The work involves mentoring students and training them about strategic planning and the unique challenges of nonprofit management. Well, not only that, the students receive a nonprofit management certificate, and they also get some help finding paid internships. Tell us about this organization.
So when I first started teaching at NAU, the dean had this idea, let's create a entrepreneurship center, because students always have ideas. He said, you have the background having worked with so many startups. And we started to look at the idea, and then a foundation stepped forward and said, if you did it as nonprofit entrepreneurship, we would be interested in funding that.
Wow.
And their struggle was, as a foundation, they saw themselves always giving money to nonprofits, only to have the nonprofits eventually go out of business, because they didn't understand, as a nonprofit, you still have to have profit, and you still have to run it like a real business.
It's still a business.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And one of the biggest problems you tend to have is that people are very passionate about something, but passion isn't enough. You have to have some basic business. And so I created a certificate program of 5 courses where students could go through these 5 courses that cover everything from governance to accounting to law, marketing and management. And as I started teaching these courses, local nonprofits said, can we also attend these classes? So we ended up creating a full-on nonprofit center at NAU, and nonprofits have the ability to come to us and get mentoring from me or from the students that are in the classes. And then we do projects and internships in the local community for the nonprofits.
That is hugely valuable.
Yeah, it's a huge win-win. Students actually get to see what the real world is like, and those organizations who can't afford to have, in some cases, MBA students and seniors come in and help them. And so we have, through the program, it's been running now for 6 years. I've had more than 1,000 students go through the classes. I've had thousands of hours of volunteer work that they've done, and then more than 1,000 hours of internship where students get paid and it's free to the nonprofit organization.
Oh, what a deal. What a win-win. Well, that's so true. I've seen plenty of nonprofit organizations that have boards of great people, passionate people about the cause, but not necessarily business people. And those skills are every bit as necessary in nonprofit as they are in for-profit businesses.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So, Paul, in reading your book and in conversations with you and through the blog, we call them columns, that you wrote for Flagstaff Business News, Ask the CEO, for a few years. My husband and I want you to know we really enjoyed reading those, and there's so much knowledge that you have to share. I want to thank you so much for sharing that knowledge with us here and also sharing it in your book, Serial CEO Lessons from the Climb. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me today.
This was fun. I learned a lot. You can pick up a copy of Paul Thomas's new book, Serial CEO, Lessons from the Climb, on Amazon. Paul is an assistant professor of practice and executive in residence at Northern Arizona University in the W.A. Franke College of Business. He teaches management, international business, and entrepreneurship. He also is the co-founder and director of the Northern Arizona Center for Nonprofit Entrepreneurship, and he is the CEO of Northern Arizona Leadership Alliance. And you can reach him at thomas.tpaul@gmail.com. Paul Thomas grounds us through his book, Serial CEO, and in his words about listening, trusting your gut, and being a good ambassador for your company and your country. And I'll leave you with his words. He says, true success is not measured by personal gain or outward achievements like titles, wealth, or possessions. It lies in the positive impact you make on the world around you. That's Zonie Living, business, adventure, and leadership. I'm Bonnie Stevens.